The Grand Ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton sparkled with crystal chandeliers and success as Davidson Industries elite gathered to celebrate my father's retirement. 40 years of building the country's largest steel manufacturing empire had earned him this moment of glory. I adjusted my Chanel dress, not that anyone here would recognize it as anything but trying too hard, and watched the scene unfold from my assigned seat, the children's table. "Here's your place card, Emma," my sister Diana smirked, placing it between a 7-year-old's dinosaur placemat and a 9-year-old's coloring book. "We thought you'd be more comfortable here, given your simple business understanding." I smoothed down my dress and glanced at my Patek Philippe watch, a family heirloom my grandmother had secretly given me before she passed. In exactly 47 minutes, every phone in this room would buzz with news that would choke the champagne in their throats. "Thank you for thinking of me," I replied quietly, accepting the juice box Diana mockingly placed beside my plate. The same Diana who, as COO of Davidson Industries, had no idea that her entire executive future now rested in her simple sister's hands. "Still playing with that little investment blog of yours?" My brother Marcus called from the executive table, his voice carrying just far enough to draw snickers from nearby corporate officers. "What was it called again?" "Money for Beginners." If they only knew that Money for Beginners was just a front for Eclipse Capital, the shadowy investment firm that had been systematically acquiring Davidson Industries shares through a complex web of shell companies for the past 3 years. "Something like that," I murmured, watching my father hold court at the main table. George Davidson, steel tycoon and patriarch, celebrating his legacy while remaining completely unaware that ownership of his company had shifted right under his nose. "Emma's very good at explaining basic finances to people," Diana announced to the nearby tables, her voice dripping with false praise. "She helps small businesses with their, what do you call it, sweetie? Piggy bank management." The executives laughed politely while I sat at my kiddie table, thinking about the documents waiting in my office safe. Documents that would reveal that their precious Davidson Industries was now majority-owned by Eclipse Capital by me. "Dad's giving his speech soon," Marcus said, straightening his Italian silk tie. "Try not to interrupt with any of your cute little money tips, okay?" I nodded, taking a sip from my juice box while checking my phone. A message from my CFO: "Final share purchase complete. We now own 51.3% of Davidson Industries. Press release scheduled for 8:45 p.m. Board meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. "Emma, please put your phone away," my mother sighed from the executive table. "It's rude to check your little blog during your father's retirement party." I slipped the phone back into my Hermes clutch, another detail they'd dismiss as a knockoff, and watched as my father approached the podium. George Davidson, steel titan and notorious control freak, about to give a retirement speech to a company he thought he still owned. 30 minutes, my brother's stage whispered to Diana. 30 minutes of Dad's speech, then we can finally announce the new executive structure. He smirked in my direction. "Sorry, sis, no positions available in the kiddie division." If he only knew that I'd already restructured the entire executive team. The papers were sitting on my desk, ready to be implemented tomorrow morning. Marcus's precious EVP position? Eliminated. Diana's role? Significantly reduced in scope. "Ladies and gentlemen," my father's voice boomed through the ballroom. "For 40 years, Davidson Industries has been more than a company. It's been my legacy." I checked my watch again. 20 minutes until the press release. 20 minutes until every financial news outlet in the country announced that Davidson Industries had a new owner. A waiter passed by, offering champagne to the executive table but pointedly skipping the children's section. Diana caught my eye and raised her glass with a mocking smile. "To family business," she mouthed. I raised my juice box in return, thinking about how tomorrow's board meeting would go. About how their perfectly ordered corporate world was about to be completely upended by the sister they'd never bothered to take seriously. Sometimes the best revenge isn't served cold. Sometimes it's served in a juice box with a side of corporate takeover. My father was still speaking, his voice full of pride. And now, as I passed the reins to the next generation. Little did he know the next generation had already taken them, just not the one he'd been grooming for the past decade. I checked my watch one final time. 15 minutes until the announcement. 15 minutes until they learned that while they were busy mocking my simple understanding of business, I'd orchestrated the largest acquisition in Davidson Industries history. The children at my table were happily coloring their placemats, oblivious to the corporate drama about to unfold. One of them offered me a crayon. "No thank you," I smiled. "I have a feeling things are about to get very colorful on their own." At exactly 8:45 p.m., as my father was wrapping up his speech about keeping Davidson Industries in the family, every phone in the ballroom started buzzing simultaneously. The synchronized notification sound was like a symphony of impending chaos. I watched as Diana, mid-sip of her champagne, glanced at her phone. The crystal glass froze halfway to her lips. Marcus, who had been practicing his future CEO wave, fumbled his phone so badly it clattered against his leather Oxford shoes. Breaking news. Davidson Industries acquired by Eclipse Capital. Mystery investor takes control of steel giant. The ballroom's ambient chatter died as executives started frantically checking their phones, their faces shifting from confusion to panic. My father, still at the podium, seemed puzzled by the sudden disruption of his moment. "Diana," he called out, "what's going on?" But Diana was too busy frantically typing on her phone, probably trying to reach the board members who had already received my midnight meeting notification. Marcus had gone pale, his perfectly tanned complexion now matching his white dress shirt. "This is impossible," he muttered, loud enough for me to hear from my kiddie table. "We control all the voting shares. Dad made sure of it." I pulled out my own phone, checking the message from my CFO. "Stock trading halted. Up 47% on acquisition news. Your father's net worth just increased by $2.1 billion. Not that he'll be celebrating. Someone do something." Diana's voice cracked as she stood up, her designer dress rustling with panic. "Call legal. Call Pierre. Call your new boss," I suggested quietly, standing up from the children's table. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the kids stopped coloring, sensing the dramatic shift in the room's energy. "What did you say?" Diana whispered, her perfectly applied makeup creasing as she frowned. I walked toward the podium, each click of my heels echoing in the stunned ballroom. "Eclipse Capital isn't a mystery investor, Diana. It's my company." "That's ridiculous," Marcus laughed, but his voice trembled. "You run a financial advice blog. You play with penny stocks." I reached the podium where my father stood frozen, his retirement speech forgotten in his hand. "Actually, Marcus, I run one of the largest private equity firms in the country. The blog was just a convenient cover." "Emma?" My father finally found his voice. "What are you talking about?" I turned to face the room, taking my place at the podium, taking my place as the new owner of Davidson Industries. "While you were all busy dismissing me to the children's table," I began, my voice carrying through the silent ballroom, "I was building Eclipse Capital into a powerhouse. While you mocked my simple understanding of business, I was systematically acquiring Davidson Industries through a network of shell companies." Diana stumbled back into her chair. "The Singapore acquisition last year." "Was me," I nodded. "So was the European merger. And the mysterious investor who kept buying up shares through different brokers? Also me." Marcus rushed forward, his face flushed with anger. "Dad, she can't do this. We're the ones who worked here. We're the ones who learned the business." "Actually," I pulled out my phone and projected Eclipse Capital's portfolio onto the ballroom screens, "I learned the business better than any of you. Your steel division is operating at 60% efficiency. Your international contracts are undervalued by millions. And your executive compensation," I paused, looking directly at Marcus, "is embarrassingly bloated." The screens filled with charts and data, 3 years of research and analysis that showed exactly how poorly they'd been running our family's legacy. "Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., I continued, "the board will meet to approve the new corporate structure. Diana, your COO position is being restructured. Marcus, your division is being completely overhauled. You can't just walk in here and—" Diana started. "I can," I cut her off. "I own 51.3% of Davidson Industries. Which means I can do exactly what you've been doing to me for years. Decide who sits at which table." The next few moments in the ballroom felt like a slow-motion scene from a corporate thriller. My father, the great George Davidson, gripped the podium for support as 40 years of assumed control crumbled around him. The executives who had laughed at my juice box earlier were now frantically checking their company stock options on their phones. The numbers don't lie, I continued, clicking through the presentation on the screens. While you were all focused on maintaining the status quo, Davidson Industries has been losing market share to more innovative competitors. Our Asian markets are underperforming by 40%. Our European contracts are bleeding money. Those markets are complex, Diana protested weakly. The international business environment is exactly what I specialized in while you thought I was playing with my blog. I cut her off. Eclipse Capital has turned around 17 international steel manufacturers in the past 5 years. Which is why our first order of business will be completely restructuring Davidson's global operations. Marcus surged forward, his face red with rage. This is our company. We worked here our whole lives while you sat around writing articles about penny stocks. Actually, I pulled up another screen. While you were working here, I was building this. The screens filled with Eclipse Capital's complete portfolio, over $50 billion in assets under management, with successful turnarounds in every major industrial sector. Those small businesses I helped? I continued, enjoying the way Marcus's face paled further. They were test cases for our management systems. The basic financial advice I gave? It was based on strategies that have generated 300% returns for our investors. My mother, who had been sitting in shocked silence, finally found her voice. Emma, darling, surely we can discuss this as a family. Like you discussed seating arrangements tonight? I asked quietly. Or like you discussed my role in the company all those times I tried to contribute ideas. I pulled up another document on the screens, years of correspondence where my suggestions for company improvements had been ignored or dismissed. Proposals for efficiency improvements, market expansion plans, innovative manufacturing processes, all filed away with condescending notes about my cute attempts to understand the business. Your leadership, I addressed the executive table, has been running this company on outdated models and personal favors. Tomorrow that changes. I nodded to my assistant who had quietly entered the ballroom. She began distributing tablets to the board members present. These contain the complete reorganization plans. New management structure, streamlined operations, and innovative manufacturing processes that will bring Davidson Industries into the modern era. Diana grabbed a tablet, her hands shaking as she scrolled through the documents. This is brilliant, I suggested. That's what the independent auditors said when they reviewed it. They estimated these changes will increase company value by 60% within 18 months. My father finally stepped forward, his retirement speech crumpled in his hand. Why, Emma? Why do it this way? I turned to face him, thinking about all the family dinners where he'd dismissed my ideas, all the board meetings I'd been barred from, all the times my business acumen had been reduced to cute attempts at understanding his world. Because you never would have listened any other way, I replied. Because to you and everyone in this room, I was just the daughter who didn't understand real business. The sister who needed to sit with children because she wasn't qualified for the adult table. I walked to my original seat at the children's table and picked up my juice box. You all thought I was here, I gestured to the cartoon placemats and crayons, when I was actually here. I pointed to the screens showing Eclipse Capital's global reach. Ms. Davidson, my assistant interrupted, the financial press is waiting outside for a statement. And the Asian markets open in an hour. They'll want guidance on the acquisition. Marcus let out a strangled laugh. You going to talk to the financial press? You. I smiled, remembering all the times he'd mocked my public speaking. Actually, Marcus, I've been speaking at global financial forums for years. Under a different name, of course. Your new head of PR has several recordings if you'd like to watch them. New head of PR? Diana's voice rose. You're replacing people already? Most of the executive team, yes, I confirmed. Don't worry, you'll both be offered positions. I paused, allowing myself a moment of satisfaction, perhaps at a more appropriate level for your actual qualifications. The ballroom had become a scene of corporate chaos. Executives huddled in corners, frantically calling their brokers. Board members pored over the tablets, their faces showing reluctant admiration for the detailed turnaround plans. My mother had given up all pretense of composure and was openly crying into her champagne. Tomorrow's board meeting will begin at 9 a.m. sharp, I announced to the room. I expect all current executives to prepare handover documents for their departments. Diana, Marcus, your new positions will be discussed privately. I turned to my father, who seemed to have aged a decade in the past hour. Dad, you can keep your retirement plans. Your shares are still worth considerably more now, thanks to the acquisition premium Eclipse Capital paid. And what about family? He asked quietly. What happens to that? I picked up my purse Hermes, though they'd finally know it wasn't a knockoff, and looked around the ballroom. At the executive table where I'd never been welcome. At the siblings who'd dismissed every idea I'd ever had. At the father who'd never believed I could understand his world. Family. I smiled slightly. Family stays family. We just might need a bigger children's table. After all, I gestured to the screens showing my company's success. It seems I have a lot to teach you about business. The news crews outside were getting restless. I could see camera lights through the ballroom's windows. It was time for the world to meet the real Emma Davidson, the secret force behind Eclipse Capital and the new owner of Davidson Industries. One last thing, I said, turning back to my stunned family. Those basic financial articles I wrote? They're being published as a book next month. Corporate Transformation, a guide for real change. I'll make sure you all get signed copies. You might want to read them this time. As I walked toward the ballroom doors, toward the press and the future I'd built while they weren't watching, I heard Diana whisper to Marcus, all this time, while we were laughing at her blog. She was laughing at us, he finished, slumping into his chair. The children at my assigned table were still coloring, oblivious to the corporate drama that had unfolded. One of them had drawn a picture of a castle with a crown on top. How fitting, I thought. The corporate kingdom had just found its new queen. Outside, cameras flashed as I approached the press podium. The questions would come fast and furious. Who was I? How had I built Eclipse Capital? Why had I kept my identity secret? What were my plans for Davidson Industries?